Polls have opened in India for the sixth phase of the country's general election. Voters in 6 states, 2 federally governed regions and the capital, New Delhi, are casting their ballots. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's BJP parties won all but 2 national elections in Delhi in the past 3 decades. Now, let me just remind you, the Indian government hasn't granted visas to Al Jazeera's journalists, so we're covering the election from outside the country. Um-e-Kulsoom Shariff reports.
Voters braved the sweltering heat to cast their ballots. The president and several politicians are among some of the early voters in Delhi. Political parties have campaigned hard in the battle for India's capital. Delhi's chief minister and leader of the Aam or Common Man's Party held back-to-back rallies. The city has only 7 parliamentary seats, but it's the centre of political power. Here, Arvind Kejriwal urged supporters to avenge his arrest and imprisonment by coming out to vote. He's out on bail after being detailed by a federal crime agency on charges of corruption, days after the general elections were announced. Kejriwal says he's innocent. He's the 3rd member of the party to be arrested for corruption. His bail ends on June 2nd, a day after the elections. Kejriwal has accused Prime Minister Narendra Modi of weaponizing corruption investigations to discredit political rivals and deflect voters' attention from real issues.
They want to stop our work. This is not good for the country. This is dictatorship, and we need to fight against this. I'm fighting against this dictatorship, but I need your support.
The Aam Party was founded more than a decade ago and has been in power in Delhi since 2013. It's also increased its footprint by winning crucial polls in northwestern Punjab. But it didn't win a single parliamentary seat from the capital in 2019. So this time, it's joined a coalition of opposition parties. Some analysts say Kejriwal's arrest has benefited his campaign.
When people saw that Arvind Kejriwal was jailed, they believed that the BJP was actually jailing somebody who was a legitimate opposition, who could legitimately take away their votes. This jailing of Kejriwal convinced the BJP that how popular Kejriwal is.
The governing Bharatiya Janata Party also held rallies across Delhi with its star campaigner, the Prime Minister. Narendra Modi is seeking a 3rd term. Analysts say Delhi is often a microcosm of national sentiment.
The total number of people who reside in Delhi is about 33 million, and they keep rolling in from neighbouring states. So in a certain way, it represents how the country is thinking, not just about how Delhi as a city is thinking.
The elections come 4 years after some of the worst communal violence in the capital in decades. Voters say they want a government that will ensure their safety and address basic issues of employment and development. Um-e-Kulsoom Shariff, Al Jazeera.
Sreeram Chaulia is Director General of the Jindal India Institute. He's joining us live from Sonipat in India. Very good to have you with us on Al Jazeera. Thank you very much indeed. One of the key elements in any election, of course, is turnout, and the turnout in previous elections has been comparatively low. There is a possibility that it's going to be lower in this one. How concerned is Narendra Modi's government that it might get back in, but it might get in with a much smaller majority than it had before?
Yeah, well, the last election, 2019, it was a record turnout. It was close to 70% at the national level. So this time, some of the phases we have seen have shown relatively lower turnouts of 3 to 4% less than last time. But some of the phases we are seeing higher. So the final tally is yet to be out. It may be lower overall than the 2019 general election by a few percentage points. But the absolute number of voters has also increased. It's almost 970 million voters this time, as opposed to 890 million last time. So we may end up seeing, more number of people casting their votes overall, but maybe percentage-wise slightly lower. As for it being a concern, every party has its calculation to get the vote out, to make sure their core supporters show up on the day and cast their ballots. So it's not only Mr. Modi's ruling BJP, but almost all regional parties. There are some states of India also where there is some concern that, their hardcore hardcore loyalists, maybe complacent or because of the heat or because of some disillusionment, are not coming out as much as they should be. So they're still trying to mobilize people in these last few phases to ensure that they're all saying every vote counts. And of course, for the parties, it's competitive. It's a very competitive democracy in India, and sometimes the margins are small. So 1 or 2% here or there could swing the election one way or the other. So I think they're all working on making sure that their loyalists and their base, as they say, all come out. So we'll have to see what impact it has on the outcome and on the fortunes of individual parties. Definitely, Mr. Modi's party is now working on this, and they are keen that they finish on a high with just one more phase left.
I mean, critics of Prime Minister Modi say that he's weakened federal institutions, he's cracked down on press freedoms and the freedoms of the opposition parties within India as well. India's Muslim community is reported to be feeling very threatened by this. If Mr. Modi and his government feel so confident that they are going to be re-elected, why is it necessary for them to have such a tight grip on these elements of the country?
Well, India is a raucous democracy, and the opposition always makes certain claims, and and then there are counterclaims. Even I remember before Mr. Modi was in power, when the Congress party was in power and their coalition, then also critics used to allege that they're abusing the state machinery and are trying to swing the election in their favor through foul means and so on. So this goes on. I would say they are relatively confident of winning, Mr. Modi's party. And most of the pollsters predict that they will get a majority. I think they are really aiming for a huge landslide victory, or hoping for the margin of victory to be massive, so that they can implement major reforms and can push through big changes. And that's, I think, really what is at stake here. It is a competitive election, but it does look like they are ahead, the ruling BJP. So I don't think they're resorting to any trickery simply because they're insecure or anything. I think they just want to make sure that it's a comfortable and a big victory, so that the changes and the reforms can happen on a big scale without hindrances and constraints at the level of the states, because India is a big federal system, and every state has a say in something or the other in legislation. So they want to have a thumping majority. And really, that is the question as to how big the majority Mr. Modi will secure.
This election is slightly different from the ones in 2014 and 2019 because there were two significant issues in each of those. In 2014, there was anger over allegations of corruption in the government, which at the time was led by Congress. In 2019, the main issue of the elections was security. There had been a deadly attack on Indian troops. This time round, there isn't any single issue like that. How concerned is the Modi government that this is going to turn into essentially a referendum on the popularity of Mr. Modi, and part of that might allow his critics to start highlighting or focusing on what they see as flaws and mistakes and errors and possibly corruption by the Modi government?
Well, it's been a relatively clean government. There hasn't been any scandal per se that has really captured the voters' imagination. But you're right that there is this is not like a wave election centered around one issue. It's not like people are just, pouring into the election, the voting centers, saying, my security is at stake, or I feel the country is in a big crisis. So there is a kind of what we call a pro-incumbency. Mr. Modi is likely to win. So to that extent, some of his followers may also be taking it for granted that it's anyway going to win, and, we don't have to really show up in big numbers. And that's why they are concerned, as we spoke about. But I think, this is not a single issue election. It's not going to be defined by any one thing. So it's going to be an overall assessment of the performance of Mr. Modi and his party in different states across the country. And I think overall, I think the economic growth and the nationalism and the welfare schemes that they have delivered to the poor, if you add these three, they have the upper hand over their rivals, because they have delivered on a lot of their promises. Of course, there will always be disappointment and disillusionment in some sections of society. But, democracy is a numbers game. And last time, they got a little more than 40% of the total vote share. And that translated into over 300 seats in the parliament. So I think if they get something close to that or better, I think they will be happy to have done their job.
Sreeram Chaulia, we appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed for being with us on Al Jazeera.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.